My name is Sarah Martinez. I've been a paramedic in Detroit for 5 years, and I thought I'd seen just about everything that could shake me. Burned out shells of houses, overdoses in gas station bathrooms, kids who didn't make it. You learn to compartmentalize. You joke in the rig. You eat your sandwich while wiping blood off your boots, and you pretend like it doesn't eat at you later. But there's one call I can't joke about. I don't even like to think about it. Because it wasn't just a bad run. Something happened that night I can't explain, and it hasn't stopped since. We were dispatched to a cardiac arrest around 3 in the morning, East Side, Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood. My partner, Deshawn, grumbled because we'd just settled at the hospital coffee machine, but a job's a job. When we arrived, the house was dark except for the blue-red flash of our strobes. No family waving us down, no panicked neighbors. Just silence. We forced the door after knocking and got hit with the smell instantly. Stale air, that sweet sour tang of death. Inside, in the living room recliner, sat an elderly man. Rigid, skin gray and mottled. His jaw hung slightly open, eyes sunken. I froze. There was no question. This man had been gone for at least 12 hours. Probably more. But dispatch had just given us the call. 10 minutes earlier. Deshawn muttered, "This is some bullshit," but we still had to confirm. I touched his wrist out of habit, stone cold. No pulse. His arm barely moved. I looked around. Who called it in? That's when I saw the phone on the wall. A beige landline with its cord snipped and dangling loose. I picked up the receiver anyway. Dead silence. Not even a dial tone. We did what we had to do. Called it in, waited for the police to log the unattended death, then headed back to the station. Neither of us spoke much. I tried to laugh it off, like maybe dispatch mixed up the address. Maybe some neighbor dialed and left. But inside, my stomach was knotted tight. When I finally got home later that morning, I collapsed on the couch in my scrubs. I didn't even change. At 3:14 a.m. that night, my phone rang. I startled awake, fumbling for it. The screen just said unknown number. I answered. Hello. What I heard wasn't a voice at first. It was ragged, wet breathing. Then, faintly, a man's voice gasped. Help, can't breathe. My heart dropped. It was him, the man from the recliner. I hung up so hard I almost cracked the screen. The next night, it happened again. Same time, 3:14 a.m. Same unknown number. Same labored breathing, the voice gasping for help. I told myself it was stress, or maybe some prank app. But when I brought it up at work, Deshawn's face went pale. You too, he whispered. I stared. What do you mean, me too? He leaned closer, lowering his voice so the others in the lounge couldn't hear. I've been getting calls, Sarah. Not from this guy, but from that kid I worked last week. OD in the Speedway bathroom. He didn't make it. Phone rings at night, same time we got dispatched, and I swear it's him on the other end. The air between us went heavy. Neither of us said another word. After that, the calls didn't stop. Every night, always at 3:14. Sometimes it was just breathing. Sometimes it was words, gasped, broken, desperate. Always the same man. Always him. I changed my number. I bought a new phone. I even moved to a new apartment in Dearborn, thinking maybe somehow my old place was cursed. Didn't matter. The calls followed. One night, I put the phone on speaker while Deshawn sat beside me in the rig. The call came through, 3:14, right on schedule. I answered, hands trembling. Help me. The voice rasped through the cab. You didn't try hard enough. You let me die. Deshawn's eyes went wide. He heard it too. I threw the phone into the cup holder like it was on fire. After that, the voice changed. It wasn't just begging anymore. It knew things. It described exactly what I did during failed resuscitations, how many compressions, which arm I placed the for, the moment I shook my head at the ER doc. Things no prank caller could ever know. One night, the voice hissed. I felt your hands on my chest. I heard you whisper you were sorry. You thought nobody heard, but I did. My blood ran cold. Because he was right. I had whispered it. Just a reflex, just something I said to the dead when I knew they weren't coming back. Nobody alive could have heard me. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. My coworkers noticed the bags under my eyes, the way I flinched at every ringtone. Then came the night it changed forever. I turned off my phone, thinking if I didn't answer, maybe it would stop. But at exactly 3:14, the station phone rang. The captain barked at me to pick it up. I did. And this time, the voice wasn't the old man. It was me. My own voice, gasping, panicked. Please, somebody help me. I can't breathe. I dropped the receiver, but the sound kept spilling out. My coworkers stared. Some laughed nervously, but Deshaun just backed away, eyes wide, shaking his head. Because he'd heard it too. I thought maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I needed time off. But then it escalated one final time. We pulled into the ambulance bay after a routine transfer. I was climbing out when I felt the vibration in my pocket. I knew what time it was without looking. 3:14. The screen glowed with an incoming call. But this time, it wasn't an unknown number. It was my own name. My own number. My knees almost gave out. Against every instinct, I answered. And there it was again, my voice, broken, desperate, dying. But this time, it wasn't gasping words. It was screaming. Screaming in terror, raw and endless, until I dropped the phone and it shattered against the concrete. The sound still came through the shattered speaker, muffled but shrill, echoing in the empty bay. Deshaun picked it up with shaking hands, and even he couldn't silence it. We just stood there, frozen in the flashing lights of another rig pulling in, as my own voice screamed from the broken phone in his hand. And I knew, in that moment, what the calls meant. They weren't from the dead reaching out. They were dispatches, and one of them is for me. My name's Marcus Thompson. I've been a paramedic running Highway 93 out of Missoula for 6 years. If you've ever driven that stretch in winter, you know it's a graveyard waiting to happen. Black ice, blind curves, semis pushing 70. I've worked more rollovers and ejections than I care to count. But there's one call I can't explain, one I know damn well wasn't just stress or fatigue. And I haven't been the same since. It started with a routine tone-out, single vehicle rollover, no entrapment, near mile marker 64. I knew the mile before the dispatcher finished. It's a section of 93 that snakes along a canyon wall, where the road pitches and the temperature drops 20 degrees after sunset. My partner was out sick, so it was just me driving the rig. I lit it up and pushed through snow that came down in those dry, silvery sheets that make the world look like static on an old TV. I expected to find a crumpled sedan on its roof, maybe a driver staggering out. Instead, I pulled up to a car that looked barely touched. A Ford Focus half off the shoulder, driver's door open, headlights on. Steam feathered from the hood, but no shattered glass, no airbags, nothing. And then I saw her. A woman stood beside the car, lit in my floodlights like a stage actress. She wasn't bleeding. She wasn't limping. She wasn't even cold, though the snow hissed around her bare hands. Her chest was heaving, deep, mechanical inhalations, like she'd been sprinting for miles. And her eyes, I froze. They were black. Not dark, not dilated. Black, edge to edge, like someone had filled them with ink. "Ma'am," I called, grabbing my jump bag. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but her breathing didn't stop. In, out, huge gasps, chest rising high like a metronome stuck on double time. She whispered something between breaths, and I had to step closer to hear it. I can't stop breathing. I tried to go clinical. That's what you do when something feels wrong. Bury it in procedure. I clipped the pulse ox to her finger. 99% saturation. Perfect. I set her up on capnography, the little cannula to measure exhaled CO2. The waveform stayed flat, 0. No carbon dioxide at all. That isn't possible. "Okay," I said, my voice catching in the cold. "You've been in an accident. We're gonna get you checked out." "No accident," she rasped. The words came perfectly formed between those heaving breaths, like the breathing wasn't hers at all. Then she looked at me with those black eyes and said, "This is where I die." Over and over. And I can't stop breathing. A state trooper rolled up 10 minutes later. He trudged over, scanning the car. "We already cleared a fatal here 2 days ago," he said. "Single female driver. Same make, same model." I frowned. "You sure?" He tapped his CAD screen. "Same plate number. Same mile marker. Same name, Jennifer Sloan." I glanced at my EPCR tablet. Dispatch had auto-filled her name before I even started charting. I checked the VIN on the dash. Same as the trooper's crash report. That couldn't be right. The car in front of us looked almost new. I loaded her onto the cot anyway, ignoring the way my hands trembled on the buckles. Her chest kept rising and falling like she was drowning in air. Halfway to the hospital, I looked up at the monitor. The capnography still read 0. But the screen was scrolling notes across the bottom, lines I hadn't typed. "She's not breathing. You are." I almost crashed the rig. When I replayed the dashcam later, the cot was empty. You could hear me talking, asking questions, but there was nobody there. At the ER bay, the nurses stared as I rolled up an empty stretcher. The charge nurse frowned, showed me the intake log. I'd signed a refusal of care. In my handwriting. That should have been the end. I wanted it to be. But 2 nights later, the tones dropped again. Single vehicle rollover, mile marker 64. I knew before I got there. And sure enough, she was standing in the snow. Same car, same steam curling from the hood, same black eyes. "I can't stop breathing," she said, chest hitching with those endless gasps. I should have refused the call, should have driven past. But I'm a medic, and she was standing there. I clipped the pulse ox again. Same reading. Capnography flatline. This time, I put the O2 mask over her face, cranking the flow. My tank hissed, the mask fogged. For the first time, she smiled. And then the trooper behind me stumbled, clutching his chest, gasping like he'd run a marathon. My monitor pinged. The capnography line jumped, on his waveform, not hers. She was pulling the breaths from him. The third night, I tried to brace myself. I told dispatch I wouldn't take it, but the tones dropped anyway, and I found myself driving to 64 like a puppet on strings. Snow swallowed the road. Flares burned in the distance, and there she was again, stepping out into the orange light, chest heaving. "Trade me," she whispered. And before I could answer, my own diaphragm seized. My chest started to pump, violently, like something had hijacked my nerves. Huge inhalations I couldn't stop. I doubled over, capnography spiking with every forced breath. She exhaled once, just once, and her chest stilled. She looked calm, relieved, as if she'd finally found someone to pass it to. I dropped to my knees, vision tunneling, every inhale cutting like glass. My mask fogged as I ripped it off, desperate for control. Snow swirled, my ribs screaming with each unnatural heave. She stepped backward into a car that hadn't been there a moment ago. A silver Focus, crumpled hood, headlights dim. She slid behind the wheel, still smiling faintly, and the car skated backward off the shoulder, rolling silent into the trees. And then my chest let go. I collapsed in the snow, retching, my lungs burning like fire. I survived, but every time I drive past mile marker 64 now, I can feel it happen. 7 breaths I can't control, chest hitching on its own, like the rhythm she left in me. And I know someday, on some night when the snow comes down like static, I'll see her again. And when she says, "Trade me," I don't think I'll have the strength to say no. I'm David Chun. I've been a paramedic in Portland for 14 years. You do this job long enough, and your body learns the rhythm of emergencies, how to eat fast, how to fall asleep in 10 seconds, how to chart while your mind's still back at the scene. What it doesn't learn is how to forget the addresses that call you more than once. The house on 82nd and Burnside started as a blip. First call came in as a cardiac arrest. Nothing unusual. We pulled up at 2:19 a.m. to a boarded-up, char-black 2-story with a sagging fence and no trespassing signs every 4 feet. Even with my boots on, I could feel the heat of the pavement. July had turned the whole city into a stove. The door had a burn mark halfway up, like fire had stopped there and changed its mind. Dispatch must have fat-fingered it. Melissa, my partner, muttered as she peered at the CAD. This place burned out years ago. We checked the perimeter, knocked on the plywood just in case, then cleared the call. No patient found. A week later, it happened again. This time, possible stroke. Elderly female. Same time of night, same address. The door was still boarded, but one panel was loose. I shined my flashlight inside. It smelled like wet ashes and old wood. We heard something upstairs, faint, like coughing. But when we climbed up, the floor collapsed under Melissa's boot, and we backed out fast. "You hear that?" I asked. "No," she lied. By the third call, I'd done some digging. 5 years ago, a fire started in that house. Space heater in the living room. Grandparents' home with 2 grandkids. Smoke alarms failed. The kids died upstairs. Grandparents were found near the front door. The call record showed someone did call 911 that night. Dispatcher noted a female voice reporting a fire and can't wake them. I checked the audio. The timestamp was 2:17 a.m. That's when our first call came in. The fourth time we went back, I started noticing a pattern. Call 1 to 2:17 a.m. Cardiac arrest. Call 2 to 2:19 a.m. Stroke. Call 3 to 2:24 a.m. Children trapped. Each new call matched, to the minute, the events reported the night of the fire. We weren't just getting ghost calls. We were reliving someone else's worst night, in order. I brought it up at the station. Got a couple laughs, you need sleep, and one quiet EMT who just said, yeah, that house. By the fifth run, I stopped making excuses. The house was colder than it should have been. I stood in the blackened living room, lights slicing through cracks in the boards, and heard crying upstairs, small, stifled, like a child trying to be brave. Melissa didn't follow me in. She waited by the rig. I stepped to the base of the stairs and whispered, I'm here. The crying paused. I swear I felt warmth, brief, almost like someone brushing past me. The moment I stepped back outside, a soft thud echoed behind me, like something had collapsed. Melissa wouldn't meet my eyes. The last night, we got toned out at 2:31 a.m. Multiple pediatric arrests. We both stared at the screen in silence. It matched the original report's time of child victims being located. I'm going in, I said when we pulled up. I'm not, Melissa said. She didn't even try to sound sorry. Inside, the air felt thicker. It didn't smell burned anymore. It smelled like dinner, chicken, maybe rice. The living room looked less destroyed. The couch had shape. The floor didn't creak the same. The clock on the wall was ticking. I stepped further in, and the house breathed. From upstairs, coughing, then a woman's voice, so faint, get your shoes, honey. I climbed the stairs. This time they held. There were no flames, but the heat was real now. Sweat ran down my back. In the hall, I saw them. Two kids crouched in the doorway of a bedroom, clutching each other, eyes wide. Beyond them, smoke curled under a door. They weren't transparent. They weren't glowing. They looked tired and real and afraid. Behind me, I heard someone call, please help him. He fell. Tom, are you okay? A woman's voice panicked. A man groaned. I've got the hose. Get the kids. I didn't move. I didn't try to run for the kids. I didn't radio dispatch. I didn't yell for backup. I just stayed. The smoke thickened. I sat down at the top of the stairs and said, softly, I'm here. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up on the front lawn at sunrise. Melissa was there, shaking me, her voice sharp and scared. David, what the hell are you? What happened? The fire department had already cordoned off the house. Demolition crews were on site. City order. No announcement. No warning. It was like someone finally got the paperwork through overnight. I didn't argue. I didn't say anything. I just sat in the grass while they brought the machine in. The house came down fast. Plywood, charred beams, a burst of soot like breath finally exhaled. That was the last time we were ever dispatched there. We still get weird calls sometimes, bad coordinates, echoes, ghost data, but never from 82nd and Burnside. The city planted a tree on the lot. Someone left a toy on the stump last week, a little fire truck with faded paint. I drove by, parked across the street, and watched it spin in the wind. I think about the kids, the old couple, how they never asked for help. They just kept reliving the moment when it might have made a difference. Until someone stayed. I don't think they needed saving. I think they just didn't want to be alone when it ended. Now, they're not. I'm Mike Torres, Miami-Dade Rescue 31, 9 years on the box. My job is tempo. Compressions at a clean 110, bag slow, AP on the twos, capnography like a metronome that tells you if the song is over. You keep rhythm or someone's world drops. The first one was a backyard arrest under a jacaranda. Purple petals stuck to my knees while the wife paced and prayed in a loop. Asystole on the monitor, ETCO26, then 0. Tube in, Lucas pounding, meds in order, nothing. In the bay, the attending looked at the screen and shook his head. Time of death. I thumbed off the Lucas and reached to tidy lines, and the man's chest rose. A full, quiet inhale, then a soft exhale through the tube, like the room sighed. The monitor stayed a perfect flatline. The capnograph trace didn't blink. I told myself it was elastic recoil, trapped air, the ugly physics of plastic in lungs. I went home, Told myself I didn't wake at 3:07 a.m. Certain I was listening to someone else breathe. The second was a bus stop overdose. 24, a girlfriend clinging to his shoelace like it was a rope. Narcan did nothing. We worked him into the trauma bay. Team did their ballet. Nothing. When the doctor called time and the girlfriend made the sound people make when a future gets ripped, his chest rose, higher than any agonal gasp. The RT said, "Post-mortem air shift," and looked at his shoes. When I lifted the sheet to secure the tube for the me, warm air spilled around my fingers. It felt like the body was borrowing my breath just long enough to hand it back. After that, I started listening for it, and then I couldn't stop. A drowning near the palmetto, water warm as soup. We called it in the rig. I left the tube in for the coroner and stood with the bag valve in my hand so I wouldn't ring it. Every time I inhaled, he inhaled. Every time I exhaled, he did. When I held my breath to prove I was imagining it, his chest froze. When my diaphragm betrayed me with a gasp, his ribs lifted late, like a kid copying you. "Let it go, Mike," my partner Nando said, thinking I was clinging to a lost cause. I was, just not the one he meant. I pulled the body cam footage I hate watching. On the drowning, my compression count ran in the foreground, 26, 27. And underneath it, my breathing. 4 in, 6 out, the way I calm my hands when they want to shake. The camera on his face caught each chest rise starting a half beat after my inhale, while the capnography number sat on 0 millimeters of mercury like a dare. At the apex of each lift, a little wheeze sketched syllables. It sounded like my own words coming back chewed. "Stay with me." I took it to an attending who doesn't lie. He said elastic recoil first, then vocal cord flutter, then stuck his tongue in his cheek and said, "You need 48 off." He was kind. He was wrong. My smartwatch started flagging respiratory events at 3:07 a.m. 3 nights running. I'd wake sitting up and breathing my 4-6 pattern like someone had wound me before sleep. I tried to break it. Short sips, big gulps, stupid tricks. Then lay in the dark listening to the room fill and empty like it had rails. At a barbershop arrest, I did something I'm ashamed of. We called it after 30 minutes on checkerboard linoleum. I stepped into the doorway, set my hands on the jamb, and didn't breathe. 1 Mississippi, 2, 3, my vision pinpricked white. On the cot, his chest didn't move. The radio crackled like frying oil. When my body dragged in air, his ribs answered, obedient and awful. I almost cried. I told Nando the fluorescent light stung my eyes. I tried to stop caring. That lasted a shift. On my day off, I went to the hospital basement. The cooler code is muscle memory I wish I'd known. The air was 40 degrees and tasted like pennies. Drawers and ranks. Lids with little lips of frost. I closed the door and said out loud, 4 in. On 4, a drawer side. 6 out. 3 more chests lifted under steel like the room had a slow bellows. You don't open without a witness, so I pressed my palm to a lid. You can feel movement through steel even if you lie about it later. The rise underneath was small, but it was there. Through the seam came a thin, word-rough leak of sound. Not angry, so tired. I heard, "Let go." I tried to hold my breath. The room held still with me. White noise turned to pressure. My lungs begged. When I broke and dragged air like a drowning man, the drawers took it with me. The chorus stitched syllables out of wheeze and metal. I left with my stomach sick and my hand numb where the cold bit bone. I resigned the next week. I used burnout and sleep and family because those are words that let administrators nod. I turned in my tablet, my badge, my jump bag with the frayed strap I twisted in tree off. Nando hugged me too long. "You'll be back," he said. I said, "Maybe," which meant I'm scared of what I bring with me. It didn't stop. At 3:07 the first night off, I woke already sitting up, breathing the 4-6 like a machine I didn't consent to. I walked the apartment counting. The bathroom mirror fogged at my cadence. I put a pillow over my face because I'm not as smart as I pretend, and felt the dark press in and out against the cotton like the room was breathing through me. I threw the pillow and knocked the lamp. My neighbor knocked the wall, and I lied fine. I went to a counselor once and said I had work-pending feelings. She said grief. I said rhythm. We were both right. I didn't tell her about the cooler. I didn't tell her about the way the time 3:07 lives in my teeth now. The last time I went downstairs, I didn't plan it. My feet did. The elevator smelled like old rain. In the corridor, the fluorescence made everything look already remembered. I punched the code and stood between drawers and tried to be nothing. The hum bowed the bones of my ears. "For in," I said, and lids kissed their tracks. "6 out," and the room returned it softer, like it wanted to be polite. I laid both palms on the nearest drawer and pressed until I could feel the cold climb into the tendons of my thumb. I counted fast this time, trying to shove my breath into a hold that would outlast the trick. 12, 15, stars skittered. The syllable coming through the seam hooked under my ribs. "Please." My vision narrowed like a hallway closing. I bent at the waist and clung to not breathing like it was a job. 3 soft taps came on the door. The kind you use when you don't want to startle a person doing the worst thing they do. "Mike," Nando's voice. I let the breath go. The drawers let it with me. I could hear him key the lock, then hesitate at the threshold because you never walk into the cooler without permission. I said don't, and it sounded like 2 voices. He came in anyway and took my wrist like we were on scene, and I was the one refusing care. "Whatever this is, it's using you," he said. "Come upstairs." "I think I'm using it," I said, and hated myself for how true that felt. We stood there dumbly, 2 men in jackets not warm enough, the room filling and emptying on my stupid clock. I tried one last time to break it for him, for me, for the drawers. I stared at his face to give myself a reason. I held until the walls fuzzed and a thread of drool embarrassed me, and the pain in my chest drew a clean line across the world. When the inhale tore out of me, every lid ticked. The breath the room took felt like relief. The sound in the seam said nothing. It didn't have to. I understood the ask and the answer. I am the wrong kind of bridge. I walked out. I handed Nando my moored pass like it was keys I shouldn't own. "I'm done," I said. I meant the job. I did not mean the breathing. I sleep with the window open now because the street's noise smears the rhythm a little. It still finds me at 3:07. Sometimes earlier if the day was heavy. I sit up, hands on my knees, and count because counting is the only thing I know. Somewhere a room cools itself and borrows my cadence for one more round. Somewhere a body that is done waits for me to stop trying, and I can't, and it can't, and the night makes a bargain neither of us signed. If there's a fix, it's not one I can do on a form or with a drug. Some days I don't answer texts. Some days I walk the pier and try to confuse the tide. I haven't gone back downstairs. I don't trust myself not to be generous in the worst way. When the hour comes, I'm there whether I want it or not. For in, 6 out. The apartment breathes like a cooler. The room is full of the people I didn't save and the ones I shouldn't have tried to keep. They're not angry. They're just tired. So am I. I count anyway. I can't stop. I transferred to psych because I thought it would be quieter than the ER. That felt true on paper. Fewer alarms, more talking. But the first thing I noticed on the locked unit wasn't quiet. It was the mirrors. The glass here holds on to what it shows a heartbeat too long, like it needs an extra second to let you go. I'm Jessica Rivera, 29, for years a nurse. The unit is a square hallway with a nurse's station in the middle and 3 seclusion rooms along one wall. Each has a 2-way mirror and a narrow vestibule for staff. The floor dips where the old elevator shaft used to be. This was surgical suites once. Below that, a morgue. Dr. Webb oriented me. He had a tired kindness that made people tell him the truth. "You'll hear stories about the mirrors," he said, signing an order and tapping his pen toward the glass. In 78, a basement fire. 7 unclaimed dead. Facilities salvaged 7 viewing frames from the autopsy gallery when they built this wing. People say the ones who died stayed with the frames. "You believe that?" I asked. "I believe rhythm matters," he said. "And some nights the glass gives us back a steadier one." I saw what he meant during a bad admission. A man, call him T, was scraping at his arms and wouldn't let anyone near. I led him into seclusion too, stood in the vestibule, and planted my palms on the glass. 4 in, 6 out, I said. T matched me because it gave his hand something to do. Fog bloomed around his fingers before it bloomed around mine. Later, the recording caught 2 breathing patterns when there was only T and my voice. Mine, and another, steadier, leading by half a beat. "Vent noise," the charge said. Old building. The folklore stayed folklore until it didn't. Webb's office had a salvaged wall clock that drifted exactly 7 minutes fast. He'd nudge it back, it would wander ahead. The incident timestamps from seclusion sometimes landed 7 minutes early, like the paperwork wanted to match the clock more than the network. We started joking about mirror hour, the stretch of night when people escalated and nothing worked except breath at the glass. I learned where to stand so the light wouldn't glare, how to count without turning counting into a test, and which mirrors seemed to settle people quicker. Sometimes security footage showed my hands on the glass, and, for a few seconds, dull shapes pressed in perfect alignment on the other side, as if some earlier print hadn't fully faded. Then Webb died. Mid-shift, in the doorway, knees folding like he was easing himself to sit. We did the work. We did everything. After the funeral, mirror hour changed. I'd be counting for someone, voice shot to a whisper, and hear Webb under me from the room mic. Let the wave crest and pass. I told myself I was remembering him. The new text said he heard it too. A storm hit late February. Wind drummed on every window. Backup power snapped on, then off, then halfway. A seclusion alarm tripped. Landry, a big man already ashamed of his body for the way it moved without asking. We moved fast. The unit went dim, then too bright, then dim again. Landry pounded his fist into his cheek like he was trying to wake up. I stepped into the vestibule and set my palms to the glass. "For in," I said. "6 out." He stared, chest jerking. The power flickered. The mirror went briefly transparent and returned to being a mirror. He pressed his hands to mine. The glass was colder than it should have been. Condensation bloomed around his fingers and around mine, even though my side of the glass was bone dry. Then I felt it, weight across my hands. Not a shock. A stack of gentle pressures, 7 distinct places lining exactly over my fingers, like several hands were layered on mine. Cold climbed my wrists. I kept counting because stopping would have proven something I wasn't ready to prove. "Borrow my metronome," I told Landry. "Steal it." His breaths caught, tripped, and then found a groove. Under my voice, Webb again. Let the wave crest and pass. The building groaned back into itself. The lights steadied. Somewhere in that shift, a hairline appeared in the mirror under my ring finger. Pain kissed the skin there. Warmth slid down my palm. I didn't move. The pressure over my hands held me in place the way I would hold someone from the other side, if that were possible. "Jess," Miguel called through the door. "We're right here." "Not down," I said when he said Landry was down. With words matter here. Landry's shoulders loosened. The fight left his face. He sobbed the small, embarrassed sob of a person whose body finally listens. The cold withdrew in a slow tide. When I lifted my hands, the mirror kept the ghosts of their shapes, dull ovals that didn't smear when the air cleared. Alondra wrapped my hand, neat ladder of tape over the crescent cut my ring had made when the glass flexed. Facilities came to check the pane the next morning. "Thermal expansion," the guy muttered, making a note. I didn't mention the 7 faint prints that lingered on the inside for a few minutes before the room swallowed them. We went back to work because that's what we do. A visitor told the secretary she was glad we'd added a night nurse. She'd seen someone with darker hair and a silver ring standing in the vestibule while I was passing meds in the hall. The secretary looked at my hand and then at the sign-in log and didn't say anything. On nights off, I catch myself setting my watch 7 minutes ahead because it calms something feral in my head. The new hires learn the counting cadence, the angle at the glass, the difference between a breath that wants to run and one that wants to hide. We keep telling them the folklore is folklore, then send them to the mirrors at midnight and let the unit show them what the unit shows. I don't have a story where my reflection moves wrong or smiles when I don't. That's not what happens here. What happens is smaller and worse. Some nights I feel like I've already put my hands on the glass and am walking down the hall to meet them. When it's bad, I dream a stairwell and 7 panes being carried up carefully. In the dream, the faces in the glass are Webb and Patience, and my mother asking if I'm sleeping. In the dream, someone says, "Don't touch your hands," and I wake with numb fingers. A week after the storm, Landry was back on the unit, shame smiling, present. Another alarm tripped. New hire on the door, counts slipping, shoulders too tight. I was halfway there when I heard it through the mic. My voice, or Webb's, or both. "For in. 6 out." I set my palms next to hers and felt the weight settle again. 7 presses overlapping 2 sets of fingers. Landry matched us. The unit side. Most nights now, before shift change, I stop in the empty vestibule, touch the tiny rough where the hairline nicked the glass, and count 3 slow breaths. On the third, there's almost always an answering wait. Not a pull, not a push. Just the sense that I am one pair of hands on a crowded pane. I tell you I'm fine. Mostly I am. My hand aches when the weather changes. Sometimes I hear my voice on an empty recording, leading by a breath. Sometimes our incident timestamps land 7 minutes early and we shrug. Sometimes, when I press my palms to the glass, I feel steady in a way that doesn't belong only to me. The folklore says 7 souls stayed with the frames. Maybe. Or maybe buildings keep a rhythm and the living borrow it. Webb used to say, "Be precise with what you can measure and patient with what you can't." I can measure my heart rate, my bandage, the hairline and the pain. I can't measure the way 7 faint ovals bloom under my hands and fade when the room is safe. I know this, though. When the wave comes, I go to the glass. I plant my palms and count. If the pressure meets me, I don't move. If it doesn't, I stay anyway. I have the shape of 7 hands memorized, and they have mine. And if one night the glass decides I've been on the wrong side all along, I hope the others will keep their places and count the next person through.